Thank you, Luke. And hello, everyone. Welcome to all of you who are joining us from around the world for Leading in a Crisis. I know we have participants joining from all over the globe, and I really hope that you guys are all doing well. You're keeping your family safe. As Luke has said, my name is Pamela Rucker, and I am your instructor for this session. And my plan for today is to tell you a little bit about my background, to explain the various stages for leading in a crisis, to explain how you might be able to go through a framework that will help you through this. And while I know that there's a lot more than we can talk about possibly in an hour, my hope is to cover several things. One is to help you assess the chaos that people may be going through and help them deal with things when they're afraid, to talk about the way you should analyze the situations you might find yourself in and find ways to determine what you need to do to help keep your bad situation from becoming worse, to talk about the way that you should adapt to the environment that you may find yourself in so that you may deal with the constantly changing situation, and then talk about the way that you should develop situational awareness and then adjust your strategy to fit the future. Now, along the way, I'll introduce some resources, as Luke has said, that we'll be providing to you guys. And when we're done, we're going to wrap up with some calls to action and give you a final assignment. I want to make sure that you guys are tapped in, so please make sure you grab a pen and a pencil as we go along. If you have questions, as Luke has said, make sure that you use the Q&A chat box. If you miss anything, make sure you remember you'll get a link to this recording, but as Luke has said, please go ahead and screenshot things along the way. Also, make sure that you are raising your hand if you have questions. We will try to, as Luke said, put those in a theme toward the end. It looks like everything's in order, so let's go ahead and get started. I started off my career more than 25 years ago, and when I first started, I worked in junior roles, but then I was quickly promoted into leadership. I worked at both mid-size and Fortune 500 firms like Overnight, which is now UPS Freight. I worked with Nabisco, Wheat First Union, GMAC Commercial Mortgage, GMAC Finance, and PSC, which is an environmental services firm that's heavily regulated by the government. And all of them were vastly different types of environments. And each time I had to work with teams, I had to learn how to use my specific leadership capabilities to implement the strategy of the companies that I was working with. And over time, I began to speak at conferences and other companies about my experiences, and I've made corporate appearances at some of the world's most recognizable brands and leading academic institutions. I've been interviewed for Harvard Business Review's Digital Initiative. I've contributed to articles in CIO Magazine and in Forbes. And you can find out more about me and the work I do by following me on LinkedIn or by going to PamelaRucker.com. Now, over the last 25 to 30 years of my career, I've had the opportunity to help a number of organizations go through crises in a variety of situations. And so I found myself in the same position that many of you find yourselves in today, where I've had to manage the unthinkable. But here's the thing, the coronavirus and this pandemic has been very unwieldy. It's had health implications, it's had economic implications, it's had technical challenges, it's had physical disruption, it's had social distancing, and the convergence of all of that has made this very unique. It's also had local and regional and national and global impact, and it's an absolutely amazing phenomenon that's very emotionally charged. And so more than that, just on the face of it, when you look at the shock of the pandemic, it really reminds you of a 9/11 type event, because nobody could ever even believe anything like this would ever happen. So of course you're not feeling prepared for it. It's been called a deeply frightening and potentially traumatizing event, especially a psychological event that traumatizes people. It's a highly disruptive economic event. It's a complex logistical event. And somehow we're all expected to manage this as we go through our jobs every day. And in addition to trying to grapple with the challenges of keeping our doors open, we also have to manage the sense of danger and the overwhelming sense of loss and fear and damage that all of our people are dealing with, all of our organizations are dealing with, all of our customers, all of our partners, and even our government officials are dealing with them today. And that's a problem because research shows that when people are afraid, their IQ actually drops. And so they can't actually operate at their highest level of intellectual capability. And the effect is they have skills, but they can't use them. And so that means we're really dealing with two contagions now. We're dealing with the virus itself, But we're also dealing with all the various emotions that that virus can cause. And the problem is that fear and fatigue and panic and worry and crisis all keeps us from thinking clearly, and it stifles our creativity. It keeps us from creating things well. It keeps us from focusing on the right priorities. And that means we don't always make the best choices when we're working with each other every day. And all of that creates this specific set of needs for your people. And as the leader, you're expected to know where they are mentally, you're expected to know where they are physically. And this is a time when your people are looking to you for guidance, right? It's a big moment for you to step up, and it's important for you to step up the right way. You need to be able to show up and to have an identity that your people can recognize. And you need to know how to behave in the moment when things are coming up, and you need to know what type of actions to take. And whether your people speak about your response publicly or whether they keep their thoughts to themselves and act on those thoughts privately, you will be judged on the way you respond to this crisis. You'll be evaluated on how you respond to it every day. Now, as you start to work on your response to the global pandemic, it's important for you to have a process to use. And so what I've done is I've tried to lay out 4 different areas, 4 different stages that you're going to go through. And then we're going to put them all together so that you can see the entire framework in action. And if we were in class, we'd actually have time to stop and discuss all of these stages and talk about how you might implement them in your organizations. But because we do only have an hour, I'm going to trust that you're going to go back and work with your teams on this and do the exercises together. So number 1, you want to make sure that you're assessing the chaos. Next, you want to make sure you're analyzing your situation. After that, you want to adapt to the environment. And then finally, you want to adjust for the future. Now, the first thing you need to do as you lead in a crisis is to assess the chaos. Now, right off the bat, I want to make a key point here. The crisis is going to hit you as you are. We've heard this talked about in the Harvard Bloomberg Initiative quite a bit. If you aren't ready, the crisis will help you figure that out. If you haven't done what you're supposed to do to get ready for a crisis, you're going to figure that out really quickly. And many people want to manage the crisis by setting up tasks for other people. They want to manage it by creating deliverables. But when you're in a situation that's this drastic, we actually need leaders. We need people to step up and understand the gravity of what's happening and know how to step up to the plate and inspire people. So you must lead the crisis, but then you must manage the damage. And you'll hear me repeat that quite a bit. You're going to be forced into a situation where you have to find ways to inspire people, especially people who are under incredible amounts of pressure, incredible amounts of duress. But you'll have to understand that their capabilities are inside of them, and you have to be able to unleash that power, especially when they're afraid, so that you guys can break down barriers and solve problems that are bigger than yourselves. And that's the one thing that's going to help you come out of this crisis. And that means that you're going to have to be brave. And that means that you'll have to show behaviors. Here's the B in that acronym. You'll want to show behaviors that have a very real and lasting impact on other people as they go through the crisis. That means you want to show things like empathy and concern. You want to show courage when things get tough. You want to have a sense of tenacity. You want to have a sense of resiliency that you'll keep coming back. The R in that acronym is that you want to have the ability to use your relationships. That means that you have to know who you're connected to and how to get to those people quickly, whether those are all of your internal leaders, your employees, your partners, your industry leaders, your government officials, and even your customers. You'll want to make sure you're taking the right actions. That means, are you being disciplined enough when things are difficult to take the right actions even when you're afraid? Do you know how to rely on a process when you can't rely on anything else? To know how to provide answers when you don't know the best solution, or to find the best way to get things done. You'll also want to focus on your values. That's the ability to remember who you are, remember what you stand for, what you stood for before this crisis started, what you stand for now, to have the ability to consider all of your stakeholders, everyone that's going through this, so you really don't become self-centered as this process is going on, and to make sure that you're acting like a good community citizen. And then finally, you want to make sure that you're setting the right environment. And this really sets the tone for everything else. It's finding a way to tell the people in your crowd that we will come out of this. This is not going to last forever, that everything we're doing is trying to demonstrate that we're working on your behalf to solve your greatest challenges. So if you're thinking about how to lead, start with brave leadership. That's behaviors, relationship, actions, values, and environment. You must manage all of those as you lead. Now, you want to make sure that you do the right thing now to make such an impression on people that even when the crisis is over, Once it's done, they remember how well you led. Now, once you understand that you're expected to show up and lead, then you want to put a process in place to manage the damage. So lead the crisis, manage the damage. And you'll want to have a group that looks at what's happening now, and you want a group that's looking at what's coming ahead so that you can know what to do later. And that way, some people can work on your most urgent issues while other people start setting up tasks for the next stage. Now, here's a mistake that I see a lot of people making at this point. They really try to lead the crisis alone. And if that's you, I want you to think about that. That won't work. Yes, you might know the business. Yes, you might know your organization. Yes, you might know your industry. And yes, you might be the person in charge, but this is actually different. Your leadership skills won't work for this crisis. You have to be successful by pulling a team of people together. And who should be on that team? You want to have people that understand your priorities. You want to have people who understand your values, people who understand your goals. You want to have people who understand the trade-offs that you might be forced to make, especially being able to make different decisions in real-time situations. You want to have people who have firsthand knowledge about the event that's happening, especially what's happening with this pandemic. And you want to make sure that if they don't have firsthand knowledge themselves, they have access to a very trustworthy source and a source that you may be able to use continually. You want to make sure that they have deep knowledge about your market, deep knowledge about your organization. You want people with diverse backgrounds so they can help you think about all the aspects of the potential answers you might be working through. And you want to have a creative and iterative and agile process in place so that people can work through some problem-solving capabilities. But then you want to pick another person that can be the facilitator of all the discussions around the table. And this person shouldn't be the decision maker. So if you're the leader, this should not be you. The facilitator is the person that makes sure that you're thinking about all of your options, that you're creating this environment that has psychological safety so that everybody has a voice. And that way it's going to give people the right to raise their hand if they think you aren't making the right decision, or make sure that you're also always doing things in the right way. Because sometimes we, as a leader, we can push for the things that we want and people may not feel comfortable talking to us about that. So as you make decisions about what to do, you want to think about the fact that the threat is really bad, right? And because of that, you shouldn't worry about overreacting. I've heard a lot of people wondering if they're making the wrong moves. Don't worry about overreacting. Act sooner than later, because that's better for you. It's your responsibility as a leader to figure out how to think about how to get ahead. Now, as you do this, that's going to help you manage the disequilibrium you might find yourself in. And when we say disequilibrium, that's really the absence of a steady state. It means that everything is shifting underneath you. And you want to make sure that you can help your crowd operate even when they're under tremendous amounts of pressure. So you've spent a lot of time and you spent a lot of money really trying to build your crowd. And if you're taking notes, your crowd here might be your employees, it might be your customers, it might be your partners, it might be everybody that's in your ecosystem. You spend a lot of money trying to build and create that, and you want to keep that. And so when I say that they're going through this disequilibrium, as I said, means that there's no steady state for them to hold on to. It's like spaghetti. When you try to pick it up, it has no real form or shape to it. Everything is up in the air. Everything is in conflict. There's a lot of tension for them. There's a lot of urgency and a lot of moving pieces that are bumping into each other. So in order to lead this properly, you want to have your crisis management team set up a central command. And when you talk about, we're going to talk about what we do with that central command in a moment, but when you do this, you want to make sure that you have people that ask questions like, what's going on with my crowd? Whatever that crowd may be for you, what's going on with them? Where is everybody located? You know, this has caused a lot of people to either move around or shelter in place or migrate from one place to another. Where are they located? What's happening with their families? What's happening with their businesses? What does everyone need? Do I have a way to know what they need and how I might be able to help them? Where have other people found resources? So in a place where we see a lot of scarcity, do we find other people finding ways to get their problems solved? And if so, how are they doing that? How can we share best practices on what's working, how we're making it through, what we're all doing? How we'll be able to communicate directly with our leadership team. So as you have that central command, how do you have your leadership team intact so you guys can talk daily? And then finally, where will my crowd go to get their information? If there's things that they're seeking, how are they going to get information? How am I going to help them do that? Now, since we know that we're dealing with a global pandemic, we know that in a crisis like this, we haven't seen anything like this before. But we also know that this crisis is creating these new downstream crises for each one of us to deal with. And so the question I have for you now is, does this current crisis that we're in cause a secondary crisis for you? And what I mean by that is, if we look at what's happening in society, it's causing secondary crises like what's happening in healthcare, what's happening in childcare, what we see happening in education. We see a high level of unemployment. We see slow or no internet in some cases. We see things bursting at the seams with the companies that we're working with in the cloud. We see people losing their infrastructure. We see mass transit shutting down. But on top of that, in your organization, you might be seeing issues with mobility. You might be seeing issues with network security because everyone's bringing their own device to put them on your network because you maybe didn't have enough devices that were already secured, had security on them for people to take them home. You may have issues with people using desktop and laptop computers that weren't designed to be used out of the office, or issues with your email, or issues with your cloud-based solutions. We're also seeing issues in the front office with marketing or CRM or e-commerce, or how people are taking their orders. Issues on the back end with accounting and compliance and supply chain. That's a big one. Many supply chains have been shut down completely. Issues with vendor management. Issues with physical locations like real estates that costs that are mounting, but their offices are sitting empty. We see issues with manufacturing facilities, issues with on-site staff that might have had to be furloughed, issues that people might have with taking payments or managing their stock. So the question is, what kind of downstream secondary crisis does this cause for your organization? And after you look at the potential for downstream crisis, you'll want to look at everyone in your ecosystem to see if those things that people are dealing with have any impact on your business. So you should be looking at things like what's going on with your customers and what type of crises are they dealing with? What's happening with your employees? What's happening with your partners, your industry, those in government? And the questions you should be asking them are, where do we all stand right now? Do I have a good idea what's going on with you? Do I have a good idea what your problems are? Do I have a good idea what your needs are? How can we pivot and adapt to what's happening in this current environment? Where are all of our hardest choices? Because we're all going to have some hard choices to make. Where do those hard choices exist for us? Where do the hard choices exist for people in our ecosystem? And then what choices are we being forced to make that could come across as political? What choices are we being forced to make that people might misjudge or misinterpret? And then where do we have competing priorities? Maybe we might have had a priority in the past to serve our customers in a certain way, but because we have to do social distancing and we want to protect our customer, we can't serve them the way we used to, and those priorities are competing. Where are we dealing with that right now? And then once you do that, you want to get comfortable with not knowing all the answers. You know, this is one of the situations where in this type of crisis situation, you're going to have to make decisions with 10% of the information you want, but 100% of the consequences. And this is a great comment that came out of the Harvard Bloomberg City Initiative, where they were trying to help leaders figure out how to deal with this crisis. And that's your challenge as well. This virus is full of uncertainty, and that makes people anxious. It makes people feel like they are fearful. And what happens to people when they're fearful and anxious? I want you to stop and think about that. What happens to people when they're fearful and anxious? They start reaching out to people for expertise, and these might sometimes be experts that don't know all of the answers. They start trying to talk to people that might be trying to manage circumstances that they have no control over whatsoever, or they try to search for answers that don't exist yet. So yes, maybe the questions that they're asking are fair questions, but you don't even have that level of detail yet sometimes. And even when the information comes in, it might actually be something that's sketchy and something that you need to verify. So one of the things that we're hearing in research is that you don't want to put the wrong answers out there. So you want to get comfortable with not really knowing and being able to tell people that, no, I don't know the answer yet, but I'm working on that. So here's your crisis framework for stage one. Number one, start the process by assessing the chaos. You're going to step up to the spotlight and lead the crisis, and then you're going to make sure you manage the damage. Bring order to the chaos as you manage the damage. You'll then manage your crowd's disequilibrium and manage your downstream secondary impacts. You'll determine your ecosystem impacts, and then you're going to get comfortable with not knowing all of the answers. Okay, let's take a look at stage two. And this is about you analyzing your situation. The question here is, what do you need to do to keep your organization working normally? And so we want you to think about what's happening in society, what's happening with your infrastructure, what do you need for your front office, what do you need for back office, what do you need for your physical locations, what do you need for your employees, what do you need for your customers, and what do you need for your partners? And the question you need to ask yourself is, what do I need to do to keep my bad situation from becoming worse? And what I mean here is, the unthinkable has happened to us already. No one ever imagined that this would happen, but the reality is the unthinkable will happen again. It just may not happen the same way, and it may happen differently to you than it does to someone else. So the question is, what are the unthinkable things that might happen to you? Because typically when the unthinkable happens, it only happens to you alone, or to your community alone, or to the nation alone. And this time it's happened around the entire globe, and it's difficult to really wrap our minds around that. We've really never seen anything like this before. So the question for you to ask yourself is, what would happen if on top of everything else that happened, I lost access to the internet, or I lost access to my phone system, or I lost access to my ability to take payments, or I lost access to my employees? And what we want to do when you're doing this is to have you go back and find a way to assess the potential downstream damage. And this is a quick framework that I put together to help you do that. I've added some examples here, but you can use your own. You can use one of them or none of them. But if we look at this, you see that in this case, this organization has lost access to the internet in their location in Chicago for 3 days. And the question is, how much revenue would I lose if I lost Chicago for 3 days? And then you want to ask yourself, what's the % likelihood that that would occur? And then from that, you'll put a cost on that. So you'd have the lost revenue times the % likelihood for it to occur, and that's the total cost back to you. And then what would it cost you to protect yourself or prevent that from occurring? How much would you have to invest to protect yourself or prevent that from occurring? And then how much would you have to invest if you waited and tried to respond or recover after it occurred? Most of us can't take another hit, and so the question would be, how much of another hit would actually take me out? Would it be that I lose access to the internet? Would it be that I lose access to my phones, to electricity, to my staff? Would it be that I lose access to my supply chain and I can't get any of my products out, or any of the things I need for manufacturing? Would it be that I lose access to my partners that are helping me deliver every day, access to accepting payments, or maybe social distancing is extended for another 2 or 3 months? What would that do to us? Maybe it's that our data might be hacked. The idea is that you want to do what works for you and your organization, to look at the damage and apply that in a way that would be useful for you. You want to do this in every area that you can think of that might happen with that crisis, because we've seen video and internet systems bursting at the seams, and in some cases reaching capacity. So the question would be, what would happen if you lost it altogether? What would happen if you lost access to all of that? Okay, so once you know where you're vulnerable, you want to find partners for your crisis ecosystem, partners to help you manage all of that damage that you've been dealing with. And so the question is, who do you need to be working with now to make sure that you can keep your business running smoothly? Is this an existing partner? Is it a new partner? Is it an unlikely partner, somebody you probably would not work with except for the fact that we are in a crisis? And are they partners with physical capabilities, partners with digital capabilities? Are they even gig workers? Now, when you go through this, I want you to remember that finding partners is sometimes easier said than done. And so you want to make sure that you do an effective job, still do your due diligence, even though you're trying to go through this in a crisis. All right, here's crisis framework stage 2. Analyze your situation in order to understand your current position. And that means you're going to list the assumptions for the way that you work. You're going to identify the unthinkables that would make your bad situation even worse than it is today. You're going to assess your potential downstream damage. What could happen that you hadn't thought of? You're going to find partners for your crisis ecosystem to help you make it through that process. All right, stage 3 is that you need to adapt to the environment. And so I want to say here that, when you're the person in charge, people expect you to know what to do. When you're the one leading everyone, they expect you to get it. They expect you to know what to do. And the pressure of that situation can be really overwhelming for you. And for some people, it can make it easy for you to try to fake it. But that's not going to work, because people can see that you don't know what you're doing. They can see that you don't have all of the information. They can see that you don't know what you're talking about. And so when you step out without a plan, you'll end up disappointing people, or they'll start to think that maybe you're the wrong person to be in charge, and maybe a new leader might know how to solve the problems that they're going through. Back really quickly. And so one of the things I want you to do is to recognize that right away from the beginning, you have to help people deal with their unrealistic expectations. Don't try to satisfy them as they're going through their problems, like you can temporarily give them what they want. Help them recognize that the crisis is real and that it's going to require you and them and your entire ecosystem to use all of their resources to try to figure this out. Now, that's important because typically you face problems where you already know all of the solutions, you already know all of the answers, you already have the procedures in place, you already have people that know how to manage them. But in reality, this is a unique and adaptive problem, and the situation keeps changing, but nobody has figured out a solution to it. So the reason we call this an adaptive problem is that no matter how many times you look at it, no matter how many times you apply your expertise to it, it changes every day. If you look at what's happening in the news, if you look at how things are changing, every day the numbers are different, every day the information is different, every day we find out something new. And so adaptive problems cannot be controlled by your expertise. And if you're taking notes, write that down. Adaptive problems cannot be controlled by your expertise. They can't be controlled by your procedures. They can't be solved by someone that sends the answers down from above. Adaptive problems require adaptive processes, and they require that you have new experiments. They require that you have new discoveries. They require that you have new ways of thinking. They require that you have adjustments in your organization. They require that you have adjustments in your customer base. If you think about how all of this is playing out right now in the media with how we're trying to deal with the pandemic, you'll see that all of this is applying, that we're having to adjust our organizations, we're having to adjust our way of thinking, we're having to allow experimentation to take place, we're having to have our customers change the way they interact with us. We're having to embrace a new set of values that perhaps we might not have embraced in the past. We're having to make sure that everybody that we deal with internalizes this change. Everybody says that they get it, they're operating in it, and that my crowd will absorb this, they're gonna agree with it, and they're gonna operate in it. This is the only way, for instance, that social distancing will work, is that everybody absorbs it, we agree with it, and then we operate in that change. And so I wanna stop and say something here as we think about how we talk about these type of adaptive problems and what it does to your organization. In order to manage the ongoing fear and the uncertainty about a constantly changing environment, you need to know when and what to communicate. And you have to do more than just try to keep your doors open and keep your business running. Communication is really important because crisis is like being in the darkness. And communication is like a light in that darkness for your people. So our eyes are inevitably drawn to the light when we see it in darkness. So if you aren't speaking, somebody else is speaking to your crowd. If you aren't constantly communicating with them, somebody else is communicating with them. Because people are looking for light and hope and comfort, and your crowd is going to remember who gave them that light when all of this is over. So if you want to be able to communicate, recognize that your people are going to find answers in the things that you say, they're going to find answers in the things that you don't say, and they're going to find answers in the way that you behave. So when you're going through trying to communicate with people, you want to talk, number one, about the situation. Talk directly about what's happening. Don't try to avoid that. But say, what is the event that we're actually dealing with? What are all of the key facts that we know? What are all the circumstances surrounding what we're going through right now? Then you want to talk about the identity of the people who are being affected. So the question is, who is this happening to? And the question people might have is, am I part of the people that are being affected? And if I am part of the people that are, of the group that's being affected, do you really know what matters to me? And so this is why it's important for you to start communicating early, because even though you might not be giving information out, you might be taking information in that's going to help you answer at least questions 1 and 2. What situation are we in? And what's happening to each individual group? Who's affected? Do I know what matters to them? Third, you're going to talk about what kind of values might be at risk. You know, why should we care about everything that's happening right now? Why should we care about the things that are going on? And then what are the things that we value that are being threatened by everything that's going on? I want you to stop and think now about all of the things that you value as an organization, all of the things that you value as people that are put under threat as a result of what we're having to deal with because of this pandemic. And then finally, action. What action should people like us with values like ours take in a situation like this? What should people like us with values like ours do in a situation like this? So considering all the things we care about, considering all the things we value, what should we actually be doing? And so that's going to help you then work within this crisis communication framework that says, number one, when I'm talking to you, I'm going to only speak about, number one, knowledge. I'm going to say what I know, and I'm only going to say what I know. I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to talk about any additional things. I'm going to say what I know, and I'm going to say where that knowledge comes from, because the reality is I want people to recognize in a high stress situation that I've gotten my information from a good source. Number two, I'm going to talk about what actions we're taking. So what are we doing? I want to talk about the actions we're taking now, the actions we've taken in the past, and the actions we're going to plan on taking in the future. I'm going to talk about others' actions. So what everybody else in the ecosystem should be doing, whether it's my customers, my partners, my employees, my industry, what other things people should be doing as well. And then I'm going to talk about perspective. I'm going to really try to give people some sense of perspective by talking about the danger that we're facing. And this is because you want to really help people come out of denial, help them get rid of that sense of denial and recognize that we really are dealing with an issue. But you also want to give them a sense of perspective that we have very real issues, but we can overcome this. So you can pull them back from the ledge when you feel like they've gone out a bit too far. And so as you craft your message, I want you to think about, number one, who is the message going to? As you're thinking about talking to people via video, talking to them on a teleconference, talking about what they're going to be doing in email, make sure you understand what their frame of mind is when you're trying to reach out to them. So this is really keeping them at the forefront of your mind. What are they going through? What are they thinking about? What are they concerned about? And then what are you trying to say to that audience that you've chosen? So whoever it is that you're communicating with, what is it that you're really trying to get across to them? You want to then say who or what is the right source of the message. So where are you getting that information from? Is it from a trustworthy source? Is it from a source that people themselves can independently verify and check out? And then finally, who is the best person to actually deliver the message? So you may have a number of people at the table who might be helping you to craft the message, a number of people at the table who might be getting you information, but who's the best person to deliver that message to all of those audiences that you're dealing with? Remember, you're not just dealing with one audience, you're not just dealing with one crowd. Who's the best person to deliver the message to every crowd that you're dealing with? And that's going to take the ability to stand up and lead the crisis, and you want to make sure that you can use your voice, because it's going to take presence, it's going to take time, it's going to take communication, it's going to take trust, and the ability to stand up and use your voice so that you can get ahead of trouble. Remember, you want to lead the crisis and you want to manage the damage. And as you manage that, you're going to also manage people's expectations about what's happening now, what's going to happen, how long things will take. You want to speak intentionally. You want to speak repeatedly. And I can't say this one enough. Intentionally and repeatedly. You know, this crisis is very large. There's a lot going on. People are getting information hitting them every single day. And as they do that, you want to make sure that you're interacting with them intentionally and repeatedly. One time is not going to be enough to help your people get through this. One message out to your audience is not going to be enough to help your team get through this. You want to speak intentionally and repeatedly and authentically to their issues. And as you do that, you want to make sure that you're framing the event. So how serious is this really? What's going on for us? Not just what's going on in the world, but what's going on for us. How serious is this and how long will it last? Who's going to be impacted by it? How will they be impacted? Define all of the groups, who's going to be involved. Remember, we talked about people being really conscious of wondering whether they're impacted at all. Define the groups who are involved. Define that I've heard your interests. I know what you're interested in. I know what you're concerned about. And maybe the difference you might have in any subgroups. So if you have teams in Houston versus teams in Chicago versus teams in Boston versus teams in LA, what's the difference in each one of those groups and how are each one of those impacted differently? You want to then also look at the list of interests that people might have, what's going to be affected, how much it's going to matter, you know, how much they should try to preserve in all of this. There are a lot of things you spent time building. There are a lot of things you spent time creating, a lot of things you spent time doing. What are you going to have to try to preserve in this? And then what are you going to be forced to leave behind? Even though you love it, even though you care about it, I have to drop it for right now so that we can still stay alive, so we can still act as a viable organization. And then finally, what behavior should you be showing? What should they be doing right now? And what should they not be doing? And what kind of sacrifices should we all be making? You know, your crowd is looking for answers, and they're going to find those answers whether you provide them or not. And that's why it's so important for you to be active in talking to them on a repeated basis. And that takes a different level of thinking than you're used to, because research shows that when you're used to being the expert and when you're used to being the leader, you actually try to look for simple solutions, and that can make things worse. And you do that, research says, because you want to have an illusion of control. You want to feel like you're making things familiar, or even if they're complicated, you know how to handle them because you know how to deal with things that might have occurred in the past. But when you have to admit that things are complex, when you have to admit that things are chaotic, then you have to admit that you don't know how to deal with them. And you didn't become the leader because you didn't know what you're doing. And that's why people say it's so difficult for leaders to do this. But trying to prove that you're right in an environment where nobody knows the answers is really dangerous for you. And that approach can hurt you and it can hurt your people. Okay, so here is crisis framework for stage number 3. You want to adapt to the environment in order to survive. Number 1, do that by recognizing that people expect you to know what to do. 2, recognize that typically you face problems where you already know the solution. Adaptive problems aren't controlled by your expertise. Solving adaptive problems requires a new type of behavior. You need to recognize that you need to know what and you need to know when to communicate, and that we've given a communication guideline to help you frame that message. You need to manage expectations as you use your voice, and then you need to recognize that this takes an entirely different level of thinking than you've been used to in the past. Okay, let's look at stage number 4, which is about adjusting for the future. Now, once you've started to adapt the environment, you want to recognize that this is going to impact your business model and force you to recalibrate your strategy. And so a lot of what you know, how you make money, how you compete, and how you have advantage over your competition might change. So that means that we can't change what we don't notice. So the first step is to become situationally aware. We want to have situational awareness. We want to be aware of more than what we're feeling in any given moment. So in order to make the right type of adjustments, you want to actually look at all of the facts, all of the emotions people are dealing with. And even though this is confusing, and even though you're uncertain, you actually want to figure out how you might be able to deal with this beyond what's happening in your emergency. But more than that, if you develop this concept called situational awareness, it's going to help you use the information that you have and help you anticipate crises that it might evolve in the future. And then you can figure out what options you might have for managing it. So I want to look at all the emotions I have. I want to look at all the facts I have. I want to look at what I think of my future might be, and then anticipate any problems that might come up as a result of that so that I can adjust. And the key here is to push past the emotions and get to the facts so that you can get ahead of trouble. Now, look, the environment and the effects of the global crisis will not go away anytime soon, right? So if you're thinking that this is going to be over and things will go back to normal, or if you feel like I just want to get things back open again and realize and go back to how things were, that's not going to exist anymore. You're going to have to create an adaptive culture. And it has multiple characteristics associated with it. Number 1, if you want to create an adaptive culture, you want to give people the right to name the elephants in the room. There are things that all of us have learned to see, but not really say anything about. We've learned to recognize that there are times we need to be quiet, and this is not a time for that. You want to give people the ability to open up and talk about the elephants in the room, the big questions that people are concerned about. You want to have the ability to share responsibility for the future. This is not a one-man effort or one-woman effort. We're going to have to all make sure we're working together to share responsibility for our future. We're going to have to allow people to use their own independent judgment. There are so many moving parts to what's going on right now. There's so many different aspects of this. One person alone cannot manage that. So you're going to have to give people control over certain areas and then give them the autonomy to work on that and make decisions about it, because you know that they have the best interests for you and your organization in mind. You want to also develop your leadership capacity so people can have leadership agility and the ability to pivot and shift as necessary, because this is going to be a fractured and changing environment for a long time. But beyond that, you want to set some time aside so that you can have reflection, you can do lessons learned, and you can have a continuous learning process, because the only way we will come up with answers that are repeatable is if we set time aside to figure out what worked and then find ways to implement that in a methodical way. You'll also want to say this is not just an all hands on deck environment. This is an all gifts on deck, all capabilities on deck, all abilities on deck, everything you have in your organization. You want to tap into every single hidden talent that you have to help you think about how you're going to come out of this crisis, not only alive, but with the ability to thrive. And then you want to create an environment of accelerated innovation. So you want an environment where people would be able to say that maybe it would take me months or even years to develop new products or to get approval. And you want to be able to actually lower barriers for them so that they can go through accelerated innovation and get response times down so that you'll be able to help, get response times up so you'll be able to help them get through this process of innovation. We see this happening a lot now where people are struggling with ventilators all over the world. And I was just watching a news article where they have some doctors that are converting a CPAP machine to a ventilator so that they can solve their problem. Now, normally this wouldn't occur, and normally it would probably take months and years to get it approved. But because we are trying to actually save lives, they're in an environment of accelerated innovation. And you want to do something similar for your group. What's going to help us get over the hump? What's going to help us survive in the moment? Because we have other values that we care about more than the fact that we want to go through this process of innovation in a long period right now. So that means you're going to have to create, as you work on your adaptive culture, you want to have to lead this adaptive work. And as you do that, this is going to happen when you can hold your people up through a long and sustained period of disequilibrium. Remember, disequilibrium is this idea that we don't have a steady state, that things are shifting every day. So as you do that, you want to build this cultural DNA for your work where you know what to keep and you know what to throw away. You know how to invent, you know how to discover, and you know how to quickly adapt and move forward. And as you're doing that, you're going to have a team that's also looking up and looking ahead, and their sole responsibility should be to help you lead the way back from crisis. They're going to help you learn lessons from this, and they're going to help you look toward the future. They're going to help you adjust to new norms. They're going to help you recognize that even though we may be able to come out of this, confidence might still be low. So yes, they might lift social distancing, but people might not want to come out of their homes. Yes, they might go back to having people in physical locations, but they might actually want to stay in a virtual environment. So you want to have people who can look at your best and worst case scenarios for the future, and they're going to help you decide what you need to be doing next. Now, one of the reasons I want to stop here and talk about, one of the reasons that some of you are feeling pain from so much of the social distancing that people are having to do is because the virus did to you what your competitor wanted to do to you, and it made your advantage obsolete. I'll say that again. The virus was able to do to you what your competitor really wanted to do to you, right? It made your advantage obsolete. It shut you down. It made the ability to have white glove service per se obsolete. And so if your advantage was primarily in your customers doing something that was canceled by COVID-19, then that's a perfect time for you to go back to the drawing board about your business model and your business strategy, because the way to win is to make your competitors' advantage obsolete today. One of the worst things that you can do as you come out of this crisis is to go back to business as usual. As we emerge from this, you want to take another look at your business model. You want to take another look at your business strategy. And one of the things you should be concerned about is the strong tie that you might have to your model or to your strategy, because you've already invested a lot of money in it. You feel like it works. It's operating in a way that you enjoy. It's been successful for you. It's been delivering results. And so you don't want to change it. You don't think anything is wrong with that. But just because you're tied to that, it doesn't mean that your customer is tied to that. And so this crisis is forcing us to actually go back and do things in ways that we haven't done them in past. So rushing back to the business and doing business as usual might not be the best thing for you. So what you want to do then is to ask yourself if you need a more global mindset. Is there something that you need to be doing in ways that you weren't doing in the past? Should I be looking at the worldwide market? You want to ask yourself if you need to develop a more innovative mindset, one that helps you come up with new ideas and quickly work them into your strategy, work them into your model. Maybe you want to ask yourself if you need a more virtual mindset so that you can easily lose the skills and the knowledge of partners that you might have. And even these might be partners that are even thousands of miles away or partners that are on the other side of the globe. You might want to ask yourself if you need a more collaborative mindset that allows you to build new business partnerships and new alliances because the market is changing really quickly and you really can't maintain competitive advantage the way you would have in the past. You might also want to ask yourself, how do I need to change my targets for the next year? So yes, you need to change your budget, but how do you change the work that you focus on? How do you look at the fact that the crisis might change what you're doing or it even changes the business that you're in temporarily? Is this a business I want to stay in the future? Is this viable for us? Does this crisis change my job to be done with my partners? Does it change my job to be done with my clients and my customers? And if so, how do I change the targets for those things that I'm working on next year as well? You want to ask yourself how this situation might give you temporary advantage. So maybe this is something that you're uniquely prepared for and you might be able to take advantage of this situation. How does it give you temporary advantage? But more than that, how might it give your competition temporary advantage? How are they better positioned than you are to deal with this crisis and better positioned to take advantage of opportunities? And then the last one you want to ask yourself is, am I stuck on a strategy for a world that no longer exists? And for all of you who've been struggling with going virtual, who've been struggling with closing your doors and having to operate a different way, who've been struggling with how to keep your business going, this is a great conversation for you to go back and have with your team about whether or not you're actually stuck on a strategy for an organization or for a world or for a capability or for a group that just does not exist anymore. The world as you know it doesn't exist anymore. Now, many leaders are not just hoping that things will be better once the crisis is over, right? They're hoping, things will be better once the crisis is over, but hope isn't a strategy, right? So you want to make sure that you're able to go back and to look at yourself and see if you need to unlearn your old behavior. And as you do that, you want to make sure that you're using your guts, finding ways to deal with bad news as it comes up, finding ways to make sure that I don't avoid that, but I'm going to use my courage to get that done. Because if I recognize that I'm maybe stuck on a strategy that doesn't exist, I'm going to have to get rid of some of my old ways, and I'm going to have to deal with the bad news associated with that. I'm going to have to tell my team about that, and I'm going to have to take that on first. Number two, you might have to use your head and come up with a fresh point of view. In order to do that, that means you're going to have a lot of vision. You're also going to have to use your heart to actually get your team on board with the vision, to actually show them that you believe in this new way that you're working in, that you believe in the things that you're doing. And that's going to take you having a lot of connection. You remember, I talked earlier about having relationships. You're going to have to build relationships with people and have connections with them so that they'll want to try to do the impossible with you. It's also going to have you use your head to prepare for the unexpected, to actually have situational awareness and think about the bend in the road about what might be happening. And that takes anticipation. It's going to require that you use your head to recognize that this is not a one-time deal. It's going to take nerve for you to stand up and to do this over and over again. It's going to require you to use your heart to acknowledge all of the turmoil and the toll that all of this is going to take on your people. And that's going to take empathy. And then finally, it's going to require that you use your guts to pull the trigger, to actually go through with what you said you were going to do. And that really takes character. So your idea here is that you want to shock everyone, that instead of letting the unthinkable happen to you, you now have to do the unthinkable. Let's see here. Okay. So here we are in crisis framework stage 4, and we want you to adjust for a future full of new norms. You want to develop situational awareness. You want to create an adaptive culture. You want to lead adaptive work. And finally, you want to lead the way back from crisis. You want to recalibrate your strategy, unlearn your old behavior, use your head, your heart, and your guts. And then you want to make sure that you're doing the unthinkable. Now here on the screen, you're going to see an example of a company that used this framework for the coronavirus outbreak. And you can see that they started in stages 1, 2, and 3 at the same time on day 1. And then they're going to kick off stage 4 as they start to gather more information about how things should be working as they move forward. You can see here also that under each stage is each one of the frameworks that we have listed. So under stage 1, you have the idea of managing the disequilibrium, managing your downstream impacts, looking at your ecosystem impacts, and then stage 3, looking at adaptive problems, crisis communications, Stage 4, creating an adaptive culture, and so forth. So for each stage that you go through, we have a corresponding framework that you should be using and conversations you should be having with your team. Okay, I want to wrap up with some calls to action and quickly get to our questions. And I want to say, look, ask yourself, what do I want other people to think of me as I lead in a crisis? So if you're the leader, I want you to ask yourself, how can I start to use all of these tools now to be more effective as we deal with the crisis? If you're not the leader, which tools and concepts can you use to start conversations about the areas that you need to look at? You know, who do you know in the organization that might benefit from this type of this information? Or how can you use your network to show up as a trusted advisor and help them see options for working through all of the issues that you have right now? If you're a partner, how can I help the company I partner with think through all of these areas to make sure we have coverage and to make sure we're taking a holistic approach to getting through all of this together? You want to then ask yourself, given what we've talked about today, what will I start, what will I stop, and what will I continue doing? There's some things that you haven't been doing that you should say to yourself right now, I'm going to start doing that. There's some things that perhaps you were doing that after this conversation today, you say, I need to stop that, and you want to make a note of that. And then there's some things you're doing well. How will you continue that as we move forward? Finally, we have an exercise for you to go through with your staff where you can then go through your own 90-day plan, where you list out when your stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 will start, how stage 4 will start, and then check off each one of the frameworks as you use them to make sure that you're completing all of the portions that you should be doing in each stage. I really hope you guys have enjoyed our program for today. We're about to go into our live Q&A portion for just a moment. But I want to say that I've really enjoyed spending time with you virtually. If you've liked today's online program and want to learn more about how to manage and lead in a crisis, please join us for one of the other programs that we're going to be offering soon. We're going to be offering programs on teaming under pressure, really trying to maintain high performance teams as they're going through crisis. We're going to have one on leading effective virtual teams, adjusting your strategy in these chaotic times, selling in uncertain times, creative problem solving for the new reality, and then fostering business continuity during a crisis. Also, if you have colleagues that would benefit from the program, we're offering this session one more time for free, so please encourage them to register. A lot of people are working really hard to figure out how to manage this pandemic and how to make their way through it, so we want to help in any way that we can, and they can sign up or even have their group sign up and go through this together as a team once the program is over. Okay, so I know we have a lot of questions coming as I've been teaching, so I'm going to turn this over to Luke so we can see if we can answer some of those right now.
Thank you, Pamela. Like I said at the beginning, we're only going to have time for a couple of questions, so we'll get through as many as we can. Question 1 for Pamela. How do you deal with leaders that refuse to accept that there is a crisis going on and are acting as if nothing has changed?
Yeah, you know, I see this a lot. I've been having this come up as questions a lot with people that we've talked to, and this happens, I think, for a lot of reasons. One of them might be that people really don't understand the absolute magnitude of this. They might see it as, yes, we have a pandemic, but maybe it's just a temporary shutdown, and they feel like it might go away. And so part of the issue might be trying to explain to them what we talked about earlier, which is all of the downstream impacts that might occur as a result of what's happening right now. And the other part might be that sometimes you have people who do this because they're overwhelmed and they're afraid. And this concept out there called competing commitments, is almost like competing values, might make people feel like, I really want to be a great leader. I want to show up in the moment and do the right thing. I want to have the right answers at the right time, all the time. And bringing me something I can't solve scares me. So they may not even know that they're actually pushing back on getting the information because they're afraid to have to say that they can't solve the problem. They're afraid, they recognize if you bring them a problem, they're supposed to do something about it, and they don't know what to do about this. So in this case, I think it would be really great to talk to them about the fact that this is an adaptive problem. And in reality, nobody understands how to solve it. In reality, we're all struggling through that. And so when I don't have an answer, I have to rely on having a good process in place to help me figure out what to do until we can build a bank of answers on what's going to be the right thing for us moving forward.
Great, thank you. Next question. Is there a right amount of communication? Do you start communicating too early and risk not having all of the information?
Yeah, this is another question that we see come up a lot as well. And I have to tell people, I don't think you can ever communicate too early in a crisis. Remember, when I'm communicating, I'm not always having to push information out. In the beginning, I might be going through stage 1 and just trying to assess the chaos. So I might be communicating to ask people if they're okay. Where are you? What's going on with you? What do you need? What can I do? And as you figure that information out, there are other people who want to know that as well. So then you can start having things to talk about. Like I talked to the group in Louisiana, here's what's happening with them. I talked to the group in Kansas, I talked to the group in Richmond, I understand what's going on with them. But then beyond that, you can say, here are the things that they need. And after you go through that process of analyzing your environment and figuring out the downstream impacts and how long you might be out or how long you might be down or what groups might be affected, you can come back and then give more communication out at that point. But I don't believe that it's ever too early to start communicating. And as a matter of fact, what I tell people is if you're in the middle of this crisis and you're already doing some of the things we talked about for stage 3 and stage 4, but you have skipped stage 1 and 2, go back and communicate. Go back and regularly communicate with your team. I tell people sometimes not just do it over phone, but sometimes set up a video because people need to see not just you, they need to see the team. They want to make sure everyone's okay. Communicate in a way that lets them know that I'm leading the crisis and I'm not just managing the damage.
Wonderful. We only have time for one more question.
Okay.
So post-crisis, what will it take to integrate the employees back to the original state that they were working in before the crisis had occurred?
So that's a good question. And I think we should go back to section 4 if you're thinking about that. I think that you're going to have to recognize that the original state that you thought you had, the world pre-COVID, does not exist. So if the original state is to get them working back in the office the way they did before, then that's going to mean that they need to have a level of confidence, number one, that things are okay, a level of confidence that the strategy that you have is going to work for them, and they need to know the right work to do. And so the idea would be that you want to have them go through this process now, keep as many of your processes intact as you can, and then just move them back into the office and allow them to go back to their normal sets of activities. But I will tell you, if you just try to do that, I think that's setting yourself up for failure because I don't think that the world is going to go back to the way that it was before. So you should plan on some things changing. Plan on the fact that there are things that people might not do that they did before, ways people might behave that they didn't behave before. And so you want to be able to adjust and pivot for that and pivot for the new world that exists. So if you don't have anybody looking at that yet, make sure you have someone looking at what the world would be like afterwards and how we're going to have to deal with what that might mean for our business, what it might mean for our employees.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Pamela, so much for leading this webinar. This has been excellent and a lot of information. We had a lot of great questions. I apologize we couldn't get to all of them. One of my colleagues, Georgianne, has put the link in our main chat. If you want to have a link to our website for our other online programs, please access it there. It's also live on our website right now, and you can access that by just Googling Harvard Professional Development Programs, and it's there under our title, Leading in Uncertain Times. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We just hope you stay healthy and stay safe, and have a great day.
Have a great day.